Mrs. Skiddery, with her name, black mist is falling off my soul, and light-filled images of my happy childhood arise in colorful, shiny colors. Sky is yearning for her. Maybe for one or the other of you, that's not unbelievable that I remembered a few verses of poetry. But when I tell you what I've learned, it's a bit more. I was in 8th grade, and I played in the school theater Miss Skuddery. And the reason why I can still remember it by heart 25 years later is not because I'm on this wonderful stage. The reason is because it never left my head again. And I'm not sure who of you already played theater, but it's an experience that leads you to want to become a character to such a degree, understand how that character acts to such a degree that it's not a question whether you want to learn something or not. You want to be that character, and that was one of the reasons. The other reason was I was falling in love with one of my classmates, and she played Madelon, but I'm just going to mention that in passing here. As I already said, my name is Blume. I'm reachable through the internet as a net teacher, amongst other things, on Instagram, and I'm dealing with education for 15 years now. And on many levels, we could criticize things, we could look on the most different aspects of it, but one question is central for me, and it already showed in those verses. How can education touch people again? Why do I ask this question? Let's look at this more globally. I'm rather sure most of you don't want any more AI-generated images, sure. But in this case, I felt it was making sense. Manuela Lenzen, the expert on AI, says, I hope I'm paraphrasing her correctly, what these AI images, when you generate them, actually show is the collective assumption of what we think how society works. So I'm going to check, I'm going to get the prompt, show children that just left a school building. And those that deal with AI know this is a bad prompt. It's not specific enough, but that's exactly why I prompted like that, because it'll show our general assumption of how children look when they left the schoolhouse. And I swear to you, I did not say, Midjourney, please show a close-up of children that just left JVA. But that's interesting. And I have to crash the humor here because actually it's not looking all that good. We could look about the problems in PISA, but that downward trend that you saw here happened globally, but especially in Germany. At the same time, I'm not sure if you know, 50,000 students leave schools without graduating and directly enter the social security systems. The silence about that in the media is due to education not being sexy enough for the front page. Also, the speaker before me also said that she wants to halve this number, which I think is fantastic. Now it's just a stadium of children without a degree, but that's something. A quarter of students don't know how to read or write on a basic level and enter high school. And that's just one of many news about the German education system. A fifth has mental health problems. My experience is, if you argue in a humanistic way about the education system, people say, education used to be important for me, but my children are out of school, so it doesn't matter anymore. But now let's take an economic argument. The ratio between people paying in and people taking out of the social system, it was 6-to-1, now it's 2-to-1, and we're steering towards less than 2-to-1. And if pensions weren't as subsidized as they already have, it would be even worse. So actually, education should be the top priority everywhere. And Aladdin El-Mafalani, who is fortunately talked about a lot currently, he said it is the greatest domestic problem of Germany, and he has a lot of good images. While it's clear that you're driving into a wall, we're still calculating the path of braking. So I want to explain the number I gave for this talk. Probably everybody knows error 404, restart your browser. That is an issue in the German education system. You would need to know where that actually is. In one of my books I wrote, maybe you could reboot the Conference of Ministers, but I think that's not that easy. Then check if you mistyped certain characters. I think I would find things for that, but I think I would tighten the focus here and say, let's empty the cache. To say how we're doing this, let's paint a bigger picture in the beginning. The experiment is us, the book that's now called The Great Acceleration, in the different developments of humankind between 1915 and 2020, there was an exponential growth. And I think I'm not telling you anything new. We all know which kinds of problems we all have with understanding that. We remember Wert, but about telecommunication, it means it grew 6 times more rapidly than the economy. Perhaps you already heard about the gym study. If you have a smartphone quota for children of about 100%. What does that mean? In theory, everybody can write anything they want. And unfortunately, we often see that in the comments section. In theory, everybody can watch everything. And just as a little anecdote, there were a lot of children and youth that fell behind during Corona, but there were students, after 2 years of Netflix, came back to school and spoke better English than their teachers. And then they ask, I think justifiably, why are we here? If what you think a teacher is standing in front, explain, handing out task sheets. Everybody can, in theory, listen to everything. I'm, of course, self-promoting a bit here. But who of you knows a podcast with a influencer in Dubai and a stock dude who distributes libertarian thoughts to a few million of people? Who of you know it? I don't want to name the names here. The ratio here is much better than with teacher. Of 350 people, 3 know it. If I ask that in my class, it's 80% in 5th grade as well. And that is a huge problem if the discrepancy between what they experience digitally and what we understand or even realize is that great that we don't even know which huge problems we have. It's one of the reasons why Adolescence as a movie was such a success. All right, in theory, we can understand everything. Even here, we had teachers on language they should ask themselves massively, what is their function? We're connecting more and more, and in theory, you can generate everything. When we look at this, and I had a similar slide, which was called looking into the future, but basically it's looking into the present. When we're able to do all that, you might ask, who would get the idea in such a world that it's more interesting, it is helpful to go into a place with people of the same age to get a specific content explained in a specific way. I am leaving you some time. You're the Republica. If I say something similar, there's usually a high-ranking teacher and says, but that's what you are doing. And it's true. But the difference is, in school, it can't be about that one single medium explains the world. The problem is no longer we don't have enough information. The problem is we have too much information. The main question should be how to deal with information. And that is putting school in front of a more basic problem that most people have not understood yet. In 1950, someone is standing there and is transmitting information. And I'm still calling myself that, but I'm no longer the only medium in the room. But if I pretend I would be that, but actual learning happens at home, well, then the students will take the means that they have access to. But I would say a system that is hackable that easily deserves no better.
The question is, what do we do with this? One answer that, for example, the OECD gives, the key feature, you have to have competency you use for everything. It's called future skills. In most OECD countries, we tend to flexibility, your own representation, and also innovation ability, creativity, and we expect that to happen. That's interesting. So something that's a key competency, that's a stance that doesn't have something to do with the individuum. It doesn't have to do with the students as such. But I'm simplifying this, but I'm simplifying it in a strong way. There's a nice paper that shows there's 91 future skills in the English-speaking world. These are future skills with 461 different skills that are really important for the sentences like a future we don't know yet. That's always interesting. We have to prepare students for a future we don't know yet. That's interesting that you can't know the future, but you know the competences you need, right? The features, the skills. I'm still here at the point that what's the reduction that I think is really important on the students themselves. Why? The idea of school in general is a great one. And after Corona, we saw that social contacts, the togetherness, the solidarity in the best case, that suffered a lot. Positive school experiences have a strong impact on well-being. But at the same time, these studies say, whereas though that, and there's no source, by the way, that 1/3 of the students at schools don't feel seen, or they don't have someone to talk to. That's the big picture I want to talk about when I say that we need a different view on what school is supposed to deliver. And then there's Hartmut Rosa. Well, how can education touch people? This is based on the resonance theory of Hartmut Rosa, and he deducted that the pedagogic resonance to get in contact with the world means to move something, and class works when it's kind of crackling in the classroom, and schools need to be places for learning, or they have to become that. Yeah, that's what schools are for, you would say, right? But I said that before, where learning is put into the homes of the people. It's just 5 different options. Either you have academics as parents, or they're academics and have a lot of money for extra schooling. Your parents are academics and they know about AI and they have the money for the latest version, or you don't have it. And if it's taken into the homes, well, who's the one that goes back to school? And I have done my homework and I haven't done them. So to be more concrete in this case, it means to make it yourself, that it's not only belonging to me, but it's touching myself existently. It's not only possible in the theater, and I can see youngsters growing, someone who's whispering when he's standing in front of 12 people, even if it's the same safe space, to someone who goes on the stage and performs in front of 300 people, and as if he's never done anything else like that. These projects are a benefit for everything else. When I talk about my students, it feels like I can forget everything. I can be the figure I'm embodying. It's a feeling of ecstatic. It's something like we could call a flow experience. At the same time, not all students have that. There's a pretty new book by Rebecca Winthrop. She said that 1/3 of kids is really engaged, but 2/3 aren't. And if we talk about resonance, and resonance can mean a lot and touch a lot of areas, music, it can be reading, it can be entertainment, but it's the opposite of indifference, or it can even be repulsion. So I'm drawn off it. So in my opinion and in my experience, everything we hear about knowledge being more important, and we have some 99er blah blah tweet. I don't know what is this, but sorry. So that shortens. This is education. Education also means what you can do after you come from work. So what can we do? Allard Asmussen say that knowledge is a productive embodiment in performative practice, where everyone has its part in the context. We also produce some kind of unsafety, basically, and unclearness. It's pretty simple, but in what we do, for example, if you create a video, if you react on it, we comment on it, that's what it means, because that's interesting, because the best definition of knowledge is gaining the art of making knowledge usable. Everything is beautiful, but this means knowledge is learning, and learning is learning, basically. That education is usually what we experience as education. In a normative way, we can say, wait, you didn't do that. When I went to school, we did that. Wait, you didn't do that. You haven't read that. I did that in my school time. But we need an open education system, some idea of understanding the world, and that's where the digital space comes in. Felix Stadler talks about a culture of digitality. What you do together, what you create together, that where you learn from it. Dick von Gehlen said today, you either get memes or you don't, but sometimes you just get into it if you want it. And how it happens online and also offline. I don't know if you have met people offline and you met them on the internet. And algorithmity. And this is where it gets a little difficult, because this is a difference to a school when we talk about digitalization, or a school in the culture of digitality. There's a model for this that's basically optimized by Pollard. If you look at the right side, the content competence, and you have the pedagogic competence, but there's also the places where this all meets, and this is not what we call digitality competence, but the technological competence. If I have this content I want to give out, how can I combine it with the digitality? And that's where it's getting really crucial. If I see competence and phenomena in a culture of digitality, we have to describe them and reflect them and to design them, basically. Only if I know that I have to do it, I can do it. Maybe you can remember Rezo at some point. He wanted to destroy the CDU, the German Conservative Party, merged that in the end, but he also battled with the media. And the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung did a video that it's interesting what Rezo does. He's argumenting on a material and his own argumentation. That's what I expect from my students as well. It has a really different name in education. They made answer videos. I blogged about this. Riese read that, and he said, that's nice education you do that. I'm inviting him. And that's how you can see, where you can see the class. So you could say that school opened a bit as a room, and there's a relevance that's not really useful at all, but that's an easier example. If you ask people what's the worst thing you did at school besides maths, it's interpretations of poems. We live in a world where German small artists with Barbara's Rhabarber Bar, he made a world hit. If I had more time, I would ask you why. Well, tell them, okay, why it's interesting. It's algorithm. Yeah, so that would mean that people are making a world hit. Does anyone know why? Yeah, it's certain features of that game, of that song.
Even if you don't have all the special terms, language, rhythm is what resonates. And on another place, you need to talk about the pull of online, but that's awesome. And I'm not saying that everybody who understood this says, oh, language can have such an effect, already becomes a lover of Hölderlin. But look at James McNicholas. I'm not sure if you saw that already. He's a genius. He takes pop songs and presents them in a dramatic way. If you're with your class, you might even go and say, which song would you dramatize in that way? But that's a competency, and that's the knowledge that this even exists. That means, with other words, to open that up. Or the other day, I wrote a test with my students where they were allowed to use ChatGPT, because when I'm talking about texts, I'm not finding out who has more competency in text, but who looks at the German news, Tagesschau. And the reaction of the students in the beginning was, oh, how awesome, Mr. Blume. Then we all get an A. But I'm not sure who knows Asterix at the Olympic Games. If everybody has the same speed, then of course the one that did it himself is the one who wins. And that's the thing. Who knows their stuff asks different questions. The question is not, how do we get AI out of the tests, but how do we design tests where you can use AI and reflect upon it so that the discrepancy between the digital world and the world, the school world and the world we live in doesn't get larger and larger. And I have to make a Morpheus analogy. I know he has been hijacked by the right, but I'm not a transmitter of knowledge. I can show doors which you can walk through, and then you can decide, do I want to do this or not? And again, education also means to get to know what you can decide against. But at the same time, you should also have an opportunity to decide against it based on something. So the student says, yeah, I understood Bodivatke, everything. I understand that you like Renke, I don't. But that's a different basis than saying, I have nothing to do with all this. I want to understand contracts and insurance and stuff. So this is something all of us need to deal with at some point so that indifference doesn't happen. I achieve something, I create and design something, and I'm touched by what I have created. And I think she's right. Who doesn't get to know this cannot become happy. There are students who go Friday, 3:45, because that's when the theater club happens, with a smile, and they're happy to do this. And they say, Mr. Blume, I'm in the theater club. I was always afraid of GFFs. Never again. And I understand that. If together with me you pretended to be an eagle or a pig and you screamed at each other, then standing somewhere and talking about something you know is child's play after that. What follows? In my world, it's media competency, necessary and across disciplines. You don't need a new subject for everything. Honestly, when it's about media, it's not like I go out of the school building and they said, "Can I help you with that?" And I was like, "I'm sorry. In that area, digitalization doesn't matter. We're living in a digital society, and that's why it has to be everywhere." The biggest challenge is the word de-implementation. We need to let go of things, of rubbish. I'm giving you an example where everybody might get angry. Correcting tests has no effect. Teachers have a problem with that because there's nothing worse than correcting tests. And once you realize it doesn't help, that's an existential crisis. And that means it doesn't mean that you shouldn't write anything there, but it means the constructive feedback on the side of a test, if it would be a written test, has an effect that a simple correction sign does not have. And believe me, if you have to correct 26 tests in a school year, and then you also know that after the hours of work, there's only a number, and that has no effect, that can be quite frustrating. But we need to let go of that. I would like to become a bit provocative here. We need fucking psychologists and social workers. You know how the ratio between psychologists and students is? 1 to 6,000. It depends on where you live. In Bavaria, it's 1 to 5,000. In Saxony, it's 1 to 7,000. You can look it up. We need fucking educators and pedagogic and assistants of pedagogy. We need fucking admins who are paid adequately. And believe me, I know what I'm talking about, because often it's like 3 people for 7 schools. One only knows about the printer, only about the internet. And if one of those is sick, then the schools have no internet for months. And I'm not joking. The most important point is we need courage to productively fail on all levels. And I mean it. Because who isn't overwhelmed today? I would love to get some of his pills. We're all overwhelmed. But with teachers, everybody says, be innovative. But when they're innovative, they're cited. They're punished, or they get afraid, and then they're not doing the things that are necessary for this society. So I'm not a German teacher. So I would like to end with another text that touched me, but on different levels. And I think it fits great for the end now. Now it would be time for gods to step out of uninhabited things, and that they knock down every wall in my house. New page, only the wind, which tosses such a leaf in turning, was enough to shovel up the air like a clod. A new breathing field. Oh gods, gods, you who come often, sleepers in things, who rise cheerfully, who wash your necks and faces at the fountains which we suspect, and who easily add their rest to what seems full, our full life. Once again, it is your morning, gods. We repeat. You alone are the origin. The world rises with you, and the beginning shines at all the breaking points of our failures. And it's lovely that I added this mistake on purpose. So you check if it's true, because that's what it's about. The beginning is shining in all the breaking points of our failures, and that's why we should all fail more. Thanks a lot for your attention.